Today, our topic is on the Diamond Sutra. In fact, I'm going to use 2 days to give the teaching on the Diamond Sutra. Today, the topic is the Diamond Sutra and science, and tomorrow, the topic is Diamond Sutra and the practice. These 2 classes, in fact, I think I want to give some teachings based on the ideas and perspective from the Diamond Sutra. On the other hand, or from a different perspective, I really think everyone needs a good oral transmission of the Diamond Sutra. I indeed already gave the Diamond Sutra's oral transmission, especially last year, back at the end of 2018. I gave the oral transmission, and now I'm giving this again because it's quite important to receive as many oral transmissions as possible. I know that many of you have already received it and who are eager to receive it again. And there are people who had never received it and are even more eager to receive it. In fact, the teaching of the Buddha, the teaching on the transcendental wisdom, is very important. And this text is taking great importance in the Han Buddhism. Out among some other sutras, such as the Heart Sutra, Diamond Sutra, Vimalakirti Sutra, Shrangama Sutra, and the Lotus Sutra. There are more sutras, of course, including Amitabha Sutra, as well as the Medicine Buddha Sutra, the Medicine Buddha's Aspiration Sutra. All of these kind of sutras are taken great importance in the Han Buddhism. But out of all, the Diamond Sutra is the most well-known and the most important. In fact, back at the time when Pongsu Rinpoche were still with us, he said that even within 1 year, even if you have only 10 days, it is quite important to give the teaching and study the words of my perfect teacher. So for many years, every year, Pongsu Rinpoche would give teaching of words of my perfect teacher. So I think this kind of continuum of learning, of listening and contemplation could really imprint upon your mind stream and would take root in your mind and make a great foundation for you. Yes, once or twice you could listen to it, but listen to it only for a few times. It doesn't really make very deep impressions for you, especially the first or second time. It sounds all very fuzzy. It is only until you listen to it for the second or third time you can grasp or you can have a little glimpses on it. That is why there are people who have already listened to the Diamond Sutra for many, many times, and they would still continue to listen. Unlike the worldly knowledge, such as primary school, middle school, or university school, all those kind of knowledge you could listen or study for once or twice. And you don't really have to repeat it again and again because, in fact, for many times, it is not necessary to repeat it, but the Buddhism teachings are quite profound, and it is worth to listen and repeat it again and again. Originally, I really wanted to give some other teachings, but lots of people requested me to give the teaching of the Diamond Sutra, especially nowadays it's the holiday time and lots of people are coming and tourists and so on. So I was requested to give this teaching again. And on top of that, the Diamond Sutra has such great power and blessings. I think it's quite important to give it again anyhow. A few years ago, I gave the teaching on the Diamond Sutra as well as I told the stories of the personal experience and personal stories of practicing and chanting the Diamond Sutra or other people's stories. There's a book, in fact, it's called The Collection of Personal Stories up on practicing and reciting the Diamond Sutra, all the way from the Tang Dynasty, which dated back to 600 CE, and until the Qing Dynasty, the early 18th or 19th century. In fact, all of these kind of stories are quite well known. The modern days, however, I have never really heard too much of the stories written down. Maybe on one hand, it is because people are very much busy with lots of technological advancement and lots of distractions. This book is a collection of merits of practicing and chanting the Diamond Sutra. This is my translation that is printed right now. I think nowadays people don't really study and research into the sutras and shastras and the stories, personal practice stories, and so on. Let's just look at how many people are actually giving teaching on Shurangama Sutra or the Diamond Sutra. In fact, not many people are teaching it nowadays. And the collections of personal stories and experience up on practicing the Diamond Sutra is also very rare. So, our generation, in fact, is quite important to collect the stories of people's insights or experience or even enlightenment based on practicing the Diamond Sutra, or how people dispel obstacles, dispel illness, and all of those kind of stories. It's quite important to collect them, especially nowadays we have the advantage of technology and swift passing of the information. So we should collect them so that people would know. In the Tibetan culture, every year we would invite the monastics to come to our family to chant the Diamond Sutra, the Good Kalpa Sutra, and other sutras, so that it would dispel different obstacles. I think this kind of wishes that we have is not really limited to Tibetan people. People, in fact, in mainland, in different areas around the world, we have similar wish for health, for harmony, for happiness, all of such. In fact, the Diamond Sutra could have such power and blessings that could bring all your wishes, could make all your wishes come true and dispel the obstacles. At the beginning, when we do such kind of rituals, we didn't really understand why we do that. But later on, I understood that it is quite important to do so in order to dispel the obstacles. In fact, only relying upon the materialistic methods to help us to make sure that we can dispel obstacles and so on is probably very limited. Therefore, we should also use the methods of spiritual power. Therefore, today I'm giving you the oral transmission so that it could bring you blessings and power to overcome all the obstacles and bring all the happiness and harmony to your life. That's one aspect of my aspiration of giving this teaching. The other aspect is that, in fact, the Diamond Sutra is a teaching on emptiness when it comes to characteristic, no characteristic, and so on. Lots of the content, in fact, is quite difficult to understand, and I would like to further explain it later. But why I chose this text to teach is because, in fact, the Diamond Sutra is the least religious and more secular sutra out of all the sutras, because it is giving the teaching of the most ultimate and the most profound teaching. Majority of religions would give the teaching in a very different way, because they won't talk about how it is not. You should not then rely on the characteristics and rely on the correct dharma. So you wouldn't say that at all. But in Buddhism, in fact, this teaching is very unique and stand out among all the religions, because it gives the teaching of the profound teaching. Rather, lots of other sutras will talk about karma and samsara and so on. But in Diamond Sutra, it talks about as long as there's physical appearance, as long as there's appearance, it is illusion. So none of the other teachings from religious texts would say that as long as you search for me in terms of appearance, in terms of sound, and in terms of form, then you are stepping on the wrong path. You cannot see the true Tathagata. And who and how you should see the Tathagata. In fact, Tathagata is devoid of form, devoid of smell, fragrance, devoid of all kinds of characteristics. Now, we have this advancement of technology and science, where the scientists are currently working on to look for the truth of all phenomena. And now what the quantum physicists found is that the truth is not the form or the appearance that you can grasp onto. If we were to use the scientific form of scientific perspective to look for the truth, we'll be able to see that the energy or the consciousness and all of that, in fact, they are all empty as well. We talk about how form is emptiness, emptiness is form. What does that mean? It means that whatever we perceive, whatever we see, whatever we think that we're being very, very objective, it may not be at all, because it is very much mixed with history, with your custom, with your habitual pattern, with your mentality or your mood. Lots of other ingredients are then conjoined with different factors. Many people hear the name of Diamond Sutra, they would say, oh, that's a Buddhism text. But the teaching that's given by the Buddha in the sutra, it says that it is then breaking through all the, or cutting through all the appearances or forms or anything that appears. And this is very unique, because when you look for the truth, when you look for the truth, this is the root of it. If you want to look for a belief or a religion inside the Diamond Sutra, you won't be able to find it. If you were to say that I want to find the Buddha that I want to believe in the Diamond Sutra, you will be able to find that the Buddha said that do not try to find me in appearance, in the sound, in the smell, and all of these, because that is not the true Tathagata. So it talks about the most profound teaching. Throughout history, in fact, the Diamond Sutra had been translated many times. The earliest translation is translated by Kurmajiva, and later on, many other great masters translated this as well, all the way to the Tangxuan Emperor, as well as Yi Jing, and many more great masters. And I think in history, it is recorded that there were 8 Chinese translations, but right now 2 versions has already lost. So in the Chinese version, there are 6 versions, 6 translated versions. The Korean translation is also a very early translation that's translated into Korean language into around the 13th century. The English translation, the earliest English translation of the Diamond Sutra was back in 1800 something. And it is also said the earliest survived printed text on record in history is the Diamond Sutra. And that was back in the year of 868 CE. It was the earliest survived printed text. And in fact, the Diamond Sutra has such miraculous history, including that it is then translated into many different languages, in Tibetan, in Chinese, in English, in many different languages, in French, and so on. Lots of people don't really understand what it is. In fact, because of the teaching in it and the wording in it, it's very difficult to understand, but people still like to chant it and read it. The Xuanzang's translation is called the cutter, or the diamond cutter. In the Tibetan version, it also says that it is the diamond cutter. So directly it could cut through the diamond. It is a teaching on emptiness, on the prajna paramita, which could then cut the diamond. So for the people who search for wisdom, for the people who have curiosity and the eagerness to find the truth, in fact, they have a great longing and a great interest to study the Diamond Sutra. The teachings within the Diamond Sutra, in fact, is very difficult to understand, just like the Heart Sutra. But even if you don't understand, if you could carry it, if you could chant it, if you could make offering to it, such merit that you generate from it is still immeasurable. It's still difficult to calculate. Due to the limitation of time today, the way I'm giving you the teaching is that I will give you the oral transmission, and halfway through the course, I will give you some teachings. So I'll give you half of the oral transmission, the first half, and then tomorrow I'll give you the second half of the oral transmission, along with my advice about the practice of it.
Shirji Bardo Shimbado Jichu Pajisha Tobachim Boom do Jusu Jakarkata Aryan Banzer Zizan Daga Janja Paramata Nama Maha Yana Sitra Urkutum Pashirji Bardo Shimbado Jichu Pajisha Jansu Togba Chimbo Sanjitan Janju Togba Chimbumdo Sanjitan Shansu Sanwatamjal Shumzalo, Nurkutobati China, Jonathan de Nyamyotna, Yarjaki Sam, Gomezivji Kangaravana, Gerlon Tony, Ngavia, G, Gerlonga Genan Jimbodan, Shansusan Genan Jimbodan, Raptum Mambo Tardan Tarchik de Jigso, then Jonathan de Ngajuti, Santaptan Chukur, Kalak Sorte, Hons of Namne, Nyamyuki, Jonker, Chamber Surnum, give Sherda Shakzo, then Jonathan de Nyamyuki, Jonker Chamber Surnum, give Sherda Shani. Jersey sur de Zeki Shavam Zatti Jerze sorti zeki shavam zate zeki shavam zate zeki shavam zate sornyum pande longze tan chuku jegne jav serte dan shamba ne la kirmo chonggo jigne shke chambo changde chamba ngondo jegne jingsu 他那个《金刚经》不是前面有一个
The Diamond Sutra, in fact, at the
就说那
beginning
个
has
去到城市里，然后发愿以后呢，
the story, or rather the prologue, where it talks about how the Buddha went into the city after receiving the offering, and then the Buddha was bathing his feet. There is a picture that
这个壁画呢，就是应该说是
then describes this scene. That is the mural from the
就是在那个
Dunhuang
世界上是
cave.
非常非常的这个著名的，
That's
应该是
where the Buddha was
大概是
washing and
80
bathing
岁
and
上
washing
80
his
岁的
feet.
时候呢，就是
So this
这个
picture was painted back in the 8th
拍下来
century.
然后对这个现在来讲的话呢，应该这个世界上是非常这个著名的，就是这样的
And this picture is very well
画像
known,
啊，就是从这个
very
画像当
popular
中
and
的话呢，
famous.
就是也可以看
And
出
from
来
this
古
picture,
代的话呢
we can see that the Tathagata, in fact,
这个奇迹吧，这个其实有些人呢
was then washing his feet, and that's his lifestyle.
探卡也
I
好
think from the
这些
picture,
当
from
中
the
的话呢
tanka,
看出来就是当时
we can see the life and
还有
the
呢，我们要
scenes
知道
of
的是什么呢？就是这个所谓的金刚
of
经
the
应
lifestyle
该
at
在
that
历史
time.
上啊，就是包括在这个
In
敦煌
the
石当中
history,
呢，它是怎么样这个发现的？就是怎么样这个后来呢，就是得以这个弘扬。
in fact, we should
这
read
些情
into
况
the
的话呢
history
应
and
该具有历
look
史性。
into
尤
how
其是现在
this part of
这
the
个国
history
外的
was
这个翻
kept,
译
was
的话呢
discovered,
这
and
个
was
有些是
later
藏文自己
on
这个翻出去的
then
中文
kept
其
and
他版
recorded, and so
有
on.
些是从藏文当中翻出去的。
Some of the English translations are translated from Tibetan or translated from Sanskrit, and some are translated from Chinese, and some are translated based on the different scriptures or different languages.
我建议呢，
Therefore,
有机会的
when
话，
we
最
are
好
learning
多
the
对
teachings
照一下
of
其他不
Prajna
同的
Paramita on the
版本
emptiness,
其
we
他不同的
I think
版
we
本
should
这样的话
then
呢，
compare to different
其
editions,
实对里面的真正的
which
这个
would be
经典
very
意思呢，就是可能会
helpful
明白
for
当然
us
有些
to
时候的话呢，
understand the
这里有
teachings
这样
of the
说，那里
sutra.
就那样说。
Of course,
这
sometimes
基本
it
上
says that
我跟
in
经
it
理
says
就是
this
让
in
它有
one
很多
version,
不
it
同的
says
那
that
个
in a
版
different
本，
version.
然后我
Recently,
经
I've
历了
been
那个
reading
不同
into
的
the
这
Sutra
个，
of
然后
Matangi
我想
woman,
本来
and
翻
then
译
at
这个
that
藏
time
文
I
版本的
felt
话呢，
that some of them
具体
says
情况
that, and
对
some
照
of
对
that,
照保留
some of
不同
the
的这个
editions
版
says
本，
something
才能
different.
才能这个发现嘛，就所以我们
And
在这里
I
很
think
多
when
佛
it
教
comes
徒
to
当中呢，
translation, when
就
it
缺
comes
少
to
这个什么样的，
then
缺少这个
studying,
研究
we
这个
don't
精
really
神。
know what it
按理来
means
讲，应该
without
佛教徒也
make
可以，非佛
comparisons
教徒也
of
可以。
different
现在很多非
sutras.
佛教徒的话呢，把佛
Therefore,
教
I
里面的个别的
encourage
经典呢，就是作为他一生的这种研究，他不一定有
Therefore, I
信仰，但
encourage
是呢，
the
他有
practitioners
智
as
慧。
well as
像《金刚经》这样的
non-practitioners
话呢，即使
to
你没
then
有任何信
study
仰的话呢，你
one
通过你的
text
智慧来去
and
研究，
in
应该对
great
这个
depth, so that you will be able to
表达
gain
这
the
个万法
depth
的
of
真
the
相。所以
knowledge
这是
and
很有
even
很
the
有
truth
必要
of
的。
phenomena. This is quite necessary.
就是下面就怎么讲的呢？咱把我们的心里去做点点给弄。 蒙不中等的格拉瓦的东的中等的几家啷个我想在那啷上过了些呢，就这段可多样的在那中的。 neftin ramjur tenye tan di per kerne de ko di ce na jondan de stanle jande la kon chaba ramjur stanle jande stanle lande la kon chaba chik da zarne pimol yepi hanga sanap chik de jondan de kalavar loks tharmo jer tne jondan de landir ke chi sordo jondan de tejang shaba jab jamba yang do zo san de chang ju san wa jembo Nam la pan da bi dan ba ji ni de pan da ba da de jang shaba jab jamba yang da bar zo ba san ji yang da bar zo ba san ji yang da bar zo ba san ji za na ni do ba san ji zo ba san ji ji xiang ju san hua jin bu nam la yong zo da ba 但把今年用手他把那中等的我们这儿老说，对了说把我们这儿老说中等的像就生活他把那样他把，一边接着那边去，接着这边去，接着什么来到中日去，得个去说了当中等的去才当把ramjer land得个去管啥多，他 它这里呢就是那个刚开始的四个啊，就我
And
们
then
这
at the
个
beginning,
金刚经里面呢，就是刚开始
in
的
the
四个
Diamond
讲的
Sutra,
什么呢？就是当时
it
那个
talks about
须
how
菩提啊，
at that
我们
time
有时
Shupati,
候我们就叫须菩提，有时候叫善现。然后他说是如何这个
the elder
调
Shupati,
伏这个就是
he
心性
asked the
啊，讲
question
如何调
saying
伏
that
心性，
how
如
should
何调
one
伏其心，这个是
tame
很关
one's
键的。
mind?
就是
This is in fact
我们
quite
这个
important.
现在这个实践当中的话呢，就是大家也知道调
In
心，
our
对吧？
modern
那么
time,
金刚经
it's in fact
最
very
主要讲
difficult
什
to
么呢？
tame one's
就
mind.
怎么样调
And in the Diamond Sutra,
这
it
个
talks
世界
about
上
how
有
to
很多
tame
很多的
one's
这个
mind.
痛苦和快乐的话呢，其实只来
The myriads
来
of
源于
joys
自
and
己。
sorrows in
但
this
是
world,
呢，
in fact, all
这
comes
个
from one's
很多人呢
mind.
就没有办法
And
就是没有办法知道。
people don't
我记
know.
得我们朋友们
People
讲
have
呢
no
就是说
idea,
这
and
个
people have no
鼻子
way
认
of
为
knowing
诸
this.
苦接触太远了。
In fact, according to
恒十三
Mipa
世
Rinpoche,
贪嗔浪淘杂念中。
he said that fools think that all their happiness and suffering is caused by external
所有
conditions.
的痛苦和这个快
Thus,
乐
they're
呢
always
依靠
carried
这个
away
贪
by
欲
thoughts of
不是
attachment
我
and
跟我有
aversion.
关系，就是跟环境有
They
关系。
feel that, well, my suffering comes from my external
跟这
phenomena.
个社会期
My
待有关系。
suffering
所以
comes
呢，
from
很适合
my parents, from my society, from other
往外
people.
进，然
So
后
they
呢，自己也是
constantly
这一片
then
心
look
性
for
和
the
气
faults
天
from the
然后
external
贪嗔
phenomena,
贪性和嗔性的这种
their
浪潮当中啊，
desire and anger
但是智者呢
comes up and
知之人
down
为
all
无
the
故而
time
生
like
啊
the waves of
接
the
触
ocean.
内心而才
And
是
they
啊
don't
这
enjoy a
所
moment
以
of
呢，
peace
这只是内观者自己最后的话呢，就是能
with the
获得这
goal
个安宁和
of
快乐。
avoiding
啊
or
这就是
acquire
知
various
之和这个
things.
愚
So
之之
that's
间
what
的
they
这
do
个
all
差
the
距。
time.
我们现在也是可以在这个实践当中的话呢，就是
In
也
fact,
可以
in our
看出来，就是
modern
在这
society,
个
in
世
our
界里，
life,
就是
we
大
can
部
also
分的
make
人
such
实际上呢，就是因
observation
为
that
不
we
能
can see
调伏自己
a
的心。
great
正因为这样
number
的
of
话呢，
people
就是
who
可
are
能
suffering because
就
they
好
cannot
多就是
tame their
不如
mind.
意的这种现象呢，就经常有。因此我们
That
这
is
个
why
瑜
they
伽师里面
suffer
有一句
from
叫做什么呢？就是
a lack
这
of
个三跳动
contentment.
气性，什么心跳夜安乐。
So,
这
if
就
one
很
could tame
很
one's
重要
mind,
的。我们每
as
个
it
人呢
is
应该
said in
就是
Yogacara
善于
Bhumi
调
Shastra,
伏自己
if
的
the
心
noble
善
disciples
于
are
调伏自己
adapted
的
to
心。
taming the
如果自己
mind,
的心就是
the
很好
tamed
的
mind
去
will
能
lead
调
them
伏
to
的话呢，
abide in
那么
joy.
就是因为心跳的原因呢，就是给我们带来这个
In fact, if you're able to tame your mind, then you will be able to enjoy happiness in your life, in your jobs, in your family life, and you will be able to see that, in fact, happiness is not far away from you. It is within reach. If you were to have methods to tame your mind, you will be able to enjoy happiness from this world, from all aspects. In fact, people are searching for happiness. Everyone wants happiness. But the most important or the most swift method of pursuing happiness is to understand the truth of all phenomena. And the truth of phenomena is then taught in the Diamond Sutra. The way that it is taught, the truth of phenomena is taught in Diamond Sutra is rather very different than other sutras, such as the Lankavatara Sutra. It says that all dharmas of the three worlds, from top to bottom, I declare to be the mind only apart from the mind. In fact, this is the teaching that is taught in Diamond Sutra as well as the Lankavatara Sutra. So what does the Diamond Sutra teach? Many people ask this question. I would answer in this way. I would say that at the beginning, Shupati asked the Buddha how to tame the mind, because everyone in the six realms have to learn how to tame their mind. And then the Buddha gave the teaching that, in fact, the mind is empty. Tomorrow we will learn how the mind doesn't have the past, doesn't have the future, and doesn't even have the present. In fact, the mind is nowhere to be obtained. The mind is empty. And once you understand that mind is empty, then you've tamed your mind. In fact, a few days ago, we've studied how different beings from different realms, due to their different habitual patterns and karmas, the way they perceive the external world are completely different. The hell realm beings perceive the world in different ways, and the human beings perceive the world in different ways. The animals perceive the world in different ways. So everything is based on the mind. It is not that the external phenomena has changed, it is rather that our mind are different. We would see that all the phenomena is outside, isn't it? You could ask this question. That there's so many external things that exist, how could they be mind? But if you were to study and analyze in the way that is taught within the Diamond Sutra, you'll be able to understand it completely. There's in fact no external phenomenon that is truly existent outside. It is only your mind. If you want to study Diamond Sutra, I think a good question to ask is that why does the sutra begin in this way, and what is it taught? So the first question that is posed by Shubhati is that how to tame one's mind, and then the Buddha gave the teaching of emptiness. So many people attain enlightenment, complete enlightenment, and attained personal insights, and attained at least happiness through the studying and chanting of the Diamond Sutra. So when you are not happy, you could chant this, or chant the Diamond Sutra or the Heart Sutra. When you are encountering some hardships, when you are going through your work, then you can chant this and the Heart Sutra. And in fact, lots of time we suffer because we cannot get what we want. But after you get what you want, you would feel this sense of fear that you don't want to lose it anymore. People who are ill, they want to get health. They want to be healthy, and people who are healthy, they don't want to get old. And that's why they go to different parlors and spas and get facial treatments and so on, so that they're so afraid of getting any wrinkles on their face, and so they want to have their face and body just as they're young. I think it is really of no use. In fact, the best way is to just study the Diamond Sutra. That's the best method. I heard that the parlors and spas are really luxurious and very expensive. There are the spas and parlors that's as luxurious as a palace. And sometimes I look at the external decors. I would ask, is it a temple? What is it? And people would tell me that it's a spa because they have good business. So they would then decorate and would construct their constructions really extravagantly. Once you study sutra, in fact, once you then attain some level of emptiness, you won't grasp onto things so solidly. Am I going to get old? Am I going to get ill? Am I going to die? You won't be able to, you won't have to go through all of those kind of anxieties anymore. Even if you study to the level of Theravada teachings and contemplate up on impermanence, you'll be able to live in a much more harmonious and peaceful state of mind. In fact, our grasping and our suffering comes from that we grasp onto the solid, we grasp onto the external phenomena as solid, where the truth of the external phenomena is illusory. I don't want to boast myself, but in fact, this is how I feel very genuinely. That is, I see that people are suffering based and for nothing really, because everything is really it is very unnecessary. Even if I meet people who are of great status, They may seem to be of great authority and a great social status, but once you get to know them, you notice that they have so much afflictions and so much anger and so much graspings and fears. Even if you see some celebrities and singers and well-known people, in fact, once you get to know them, you see that they have lots of afflictions and lots of sufferings in their mind. My book, The Cutter, that is the teaching on the Diamond Sutra, is very popular. I think it is based on the reason that this Diamond Sutra could give the teaching on how to tame one's mind so that they don't have to suffer anymore. Sometimes I would contemplate that if I were not to receive the Mahayana teaching, I would suffer as well. But now, since I've studied the Mahayana teaching, whatever things happen in my life, any kind of changes or any kind of difficulties happen in my life, I would face them with ease. I can accept them without any problem. So, from that aspect, it is the power of Prajna Paramita.
Certain zonor jivaji terki jibzora dan jomden de gitsetan dan ba ramjur lan terki ji kwasar do ramjur logzo ramjur de devjano shobe shanjib zanhwa chimbur namla pano dagbi dan ba dam so devjan shobe shanjib zanhwa chimbur namla yongso ta pi tambe yongso ta do ramjur di jirnanyo nyon la lagbar rabta yilla zongshi shanjib zanhwa tagbala yang dagbar jibi jirtar Nebra sha jirtar dribar sha jirtar rabta zongra sha jaga nge kyulab sha to jomdan de devjan oksor ne zedan dan baram jur jomdan de ndartaram nyamba dan jomdan de zedan dan baram jur landar kitsi kwasa to ram jur ndala shanchu sangwa tabala yang da brji benda nyamda dak semchin chizam semchin de devi do adan gongale kibadan ngarli jebadan zhuzhirli jeba gama zidi jeba gama zikchan nam zikchan mayan nam dashi chan nam dashi chan mayan nam dashi meba mayan nam semchin ji kama je zam semchin dag be dag ba de dag tamche pongbo lhagma me bim nyang len di bi yang yongsim nyangan le dago ter semchin tsat me bi yongsim nyangan len de kyang semchin ka yang yongsim nyangan le davran jera me do nyam do semkye do ti ji shirjana ram jur ka te chang ju sang fa nanda shi na de semchen de shi ji na de la zhang zhe sen hua ji ma xia wi xie ro di ji xie jin na ram jur gang semchen de shi ba ji gam zhu zhen de xi gam gang zhe de shi ji na de zhang zhe sen hua ji ma xia wi xie ro yang ram jur zhang zhe sen hua ngo bo la ma ne ba jin ber xia wo zi ji la ma ne ba jin ber xia wo zi la yang ma ne ba jin ber xia wo de jin de zha dang zhe dang ruo dang rab xia dang ju la yang ma ne ba jin ber xia wo ram jur ji ni jiang 삼마른 더 시바야 마네 바데르 장주 선회요 저노 디지시나 람저 장주 선화 건거 마네 버전 바데 손음기 퐁보너 람저 차도 존 라와 마연 비쇼로 람저 지르터 샤르기 비쇼고 남기 차도 존 라와가 냠 람저 기소로 앞전던데 데는 말럭조 전던데 기과서와 람저 대전도 로당 납당 상당 당당 고당 쇼금 참당 쇼금 참 쇼지 남기 차도 존 라가 라 냠맘 ramjur jik sorab jondon de ten malak so jondon de gi kwatsarwa ramjur devjin de shangchib sanhwa kangla gang mangne bi jin ba ti sonum gi phongbo no ramjur chadu zongr lawa mayin bi shoro ramjur jirni de jhnyam de sem amsan pusum sobe devjin shoba lafta bar sha nyam ramjur gi sorab jondon de ten malak so 산 벗음 소바 대전 서바 따브름 먹기다 로소 디지지나 대전 서빔 산 벗음 소바 지기와 송바 때년나 산나 벗음 소바 맘치비 라트고 데르기지 소로아담 존든데기 세단 담바람줄란 더크지 꽉사도 람줄 찌냠도 셈됨 산 벗음 소바 대잠들 준우 산 벗음 소바 대잠들 준우
All appearances are illusory. To see that appearances are not appearances is to see the Tathagata. Isn't that the most famous quote from the Diamond Sutra? In fact, all appearances are illusory. The main point of it it talks about the 32 characteristics of the Tathagata.
那么凡是所有的相呢，也是虚妄的，相也是
All
非相。
kinds of appearances
如果非
and
相相和非相眼里的话，这就是见如来。所以
all kinds of appearances are illusory, and to see the appearances are not appearances
实际上
is
是
to see the Tathagata.
则见诸见非相，则见如来，对吧？就是这个意思呢。就有些人就把这个相呢，就认为是
Some people would take appearance or
实际上
when they talk about appearances illusory, they think that do not grasp onto any
他
appearance.
在他的这个人之理念当中呢，就是应该是有一种这个相，但是这种相呢，
And
并
in
不是真实
everyone's
啊，就这种
mind,
相是
there is some kind of appearance, but that kind of appearance, in fact, it is not really existent, or it is not solidly
它这种
the one thing that everyone would recognize it as the same thing.
啊，就从复杂
In the cognitive psychology, there is a famous
其他的
picture.
说是啊，就是它是某个这个图案的话，那就是那么他们就
In fact, if you were to say that
那么这个图案呢，就是可能
if
没有
you
说
were
的
just
话
to look at it, you don't really see what this picture is.
牛兔啊，或者说一个
But
小
if I were to point out that there is
或者是下面有
a cow,
一个这个骑
there
着
is a
马的
cow's
这
face
样
on this
是我的
picture,
认知啊。
and then you'll be able to see that cow.
但是我在这个图案
And
上
then
面
if I were to say that there were two children, right, two children running on the mountains over there on the cliff, you'll be able to see the two children over there,
其实
isn't it?
如果就是比如说我们的这个父母、老师，或者是我们
So,
周围的这个人呢，哇，就是这上
our
面呢就是
parents
是你说的，就是旁边呢有什么什么人呢？这样说的话，
And
我们
the
就自然而然
teachers,
当
if
当
they
看
were
到他的时
to
候都变
tell
成
us that there is something on this picture,
但是如果
we will
没
then
有
perceive it
或
in
者
such a
我没有
way.
这样的
But
一个
if we
传统
never
的理念
received
概念
this
或者我
information,
没有这样的
if
期
we
许的
never
时候
heard any
其实
kind
是
of
他
information
知道的
regarding to this
其实
picture,
他的
and
他
then
自
look
己的
at
这个相
this,
上面呢，就是
we
没
don't
有
see
任何
anything
就是这方面的这个相。
because
这个
we
呢
don't
就
have
最关
any
键
kind
我
of
们的这个心就是起到这个作用的。
we
但是
don't
这
have
个
any
心
kind of
呢，
preconception
今
of
天就
this
是讲
picture
到
at
这个
all.
心理科学嘛，就是其实
Today
心
our
理科学
topic
的
is
话呢，应该
on
是
the
最早是
science of the
可
mind,
以说
in
是我们
fact.
这个佛教的这个心理科学，
And
现在有些
the
德国的这个一些心理学家，有一个叫做丰特，就是他呢，就是大概是应该是这个1779年的。
Back in 1779, a
到1948年
psychologist
这之间的人，那么他呢，就是应该当时翻译那个《金刚经》，就是变成俄语版。但后来他们就是
who was a Russian, and he translated the Diamond Sutra into
所谓的这个心灵科学的话
the Russian language, and at that time he said that Buddhism is in fact the
这个并
best
不是我因为是佛教的
science
这样
of
这样
taming the
说
mind.
包括我在一个其他学校
I think
里面也是
indeed that's very
用过
true.
有一个
I
叫做
quoted
是那个释一公啊，就是他是一个清华大学
I
的
quoted a professor who
现在在另外一
was
个
from who's
清华
from
大学
China,
的
and
副校长
he
现在是在
was
另外
a
一个
vice
他在美
principal
国
of
公司
Tsinghua University, and his name is Shi Gong, and
肾的就是
he
现在很多
his field of
非常
study
学问
is
的有些学的比较深的那些人
biology,
的话那就是基本
and
上是
he
认可了
is
他的一些
very
观
good
点
at his
他当时呢就是
field,
有一
and
篇文
he's
章有一篇
very
应该演讲
professional.
吧就是这个演讲
In
呢就是
one of
这
his
心理科学呢
teaching
到
and
了这个
speech,
极点
where he
心
said
理
that
这
in
科学
fact
到了
the
极限这个
studying of biology has already reached an end, because you will not be able to find consciousness based on its biology, based on the biology of beings.
这个生物科学的话，那就是现在都没办法，就是我们这个所谓的意识到底
We will
是
not
什么
be
样
able
的
to
所以他的
explain
意
what
思呢，就是
consciousness
说
is
我们
from the
应该
biological
是现
point
在
of
超
view.
出了这两个这个
We have already
层次
surpassed.
什么两个层次呢？一个是语言，一个是思维。如果
In
没有
fact,
没有借助这个其他
consciousness
的这个
itself
信息
has
其他的
already
思想的话
surpassed
光依
the
靠我
level
们
of
现有的这个
thoughts.
认知科学，或者说是我们这个生物科学的话呢，
We will not be able to explain consciousness from the perspective of thoughts and concepts. There's no way for us to explain what consciousness is. We have to then explore what consciousness is from the aspect of religion and from the aspect of spirituality. And how could you explain consciousness? We have to then study the 51 kinds of mentality, where it has the generalization of the conflict, have the afflictions and anger and different aspects of it. If you really want to know what your mind is, I think we should look for the mind from the Buddhism aspect, and then I think looking for what a mind is not difficult at all. You can understand it from the emptiness aspect, from the luminous aspect or vivid aspect, and from the function aspect of the mind. You could recognize where the mind is from different aspects. So scientists, whatever field they may come from, in fact, at the end, when they get in touch or when they get involved with Buddhism or get some kind of studying or teachings from Buddhism, right away they understand where they got stuck. In fact, as much as our science advances, the study on consciousness is very difficult to explore. I quoted from Dr. John von Neumann. He was very special and very smart and very well known in different fields such as mathematics and computer science as well as game theory. What he said was that, in fact, there is something that is insubstantial that could change the substantial materialistic phenomena. Different scientists have different kinds of perspectives, and scientists, they are close to the Chittamatra or the mind-only school. So I think if they would be able to study and get into the mind school or get into the study of Buddhism, I think it will open a great path for their studying and their research. I'm speaking of this out of a very objective perspective. I'm not really just praising my own religion. In fact, I've read through lots of different kinds of materials and research written by the scientists and essays and books. But from the different perspectives, I noticed that their studying and their research is rather going to be very difficult to explore if they were only to explore it from materialistic aspect. So where it says is that to see appearances or not appearances is to see the Tathagata. Your mind is then formed of different factors. The so-called mind is formed of different factors, but out of all these kind of factors, is there really a solid existence of mind? There is really nothing. That is emptiness. For example, by holding this cup, there are people who would say that this cup is good, and some would say that it's bad. There are different percentages of chances of how people would consider it as good or as bad. But is it good or bad?
就真的认为是它是不好的。但是所有的人就是完全都是同意的话呢，也不是这
You
样。
cannot get everyone to
民主
agree
选
to
举
it.
是不是也是这样的？
That is why that
有一部分人
it
这个社
doesn't
会人是
have
好的，有一部
a
分人这个
solid
这是不好的，
existence
反对
of
票
good
好
or
的，但
bad.
但全部是这样通过
Just
的话呢，
like
还是很少。
nowadays when
所以
we
说
vote,
这个呢，说
when
明
we
说
go
不是
through
真正
any
的它的这个本
democratic
质上是有
voting
一种
system
真实
or
的东西的话呢，我
process,
们也应该
in
发
fact,
现。
there are
但是
people
我们人类社会
who
包
would
括现在
vote
的
for
科学
one
者
and
也
not the
是
other, and
就
then
刚才
some
那
other
个
people would
清华
vote
大学的
in
这
a
个科学
complete
家也说
different
了，
way.
现在我们真正能发现的话呢，就是包括这个先线的这些物质呢，5%左右，就是暗物质的话呢，就是90%。
Scientists nowadays they say that in fact the material that exists in this universe is only about 5%. That are the those are the materials that we then recognize and discover. But the material in this, but the non-material that is called the dark matter that is not discovered in this universe are up to 95%. So the question of what we perceive is in fact we cannot come to conclusion of what is good and bad. And if we were to be able to discover what those dark materials are, then I think we will be able to understand the truth. I have to finish 50 pages. I only read through 8 pages. There are about 100 pages. I have to finish 50 pages today.
중든데 마오티 나르갑게 타말라 담비 추랍던 직브른 게로아나 샘cen강라 더 강라라 더 건더 타빔도르데 츠급샤파 타글라 영덕브른데 시키브른 게로암 종왔다 치라가섬 중든데 지과사르바 람줄 강초들라 쩌르 마오티 나르갑게 타말라 담비 추랍던 나브른 직브른 게로아나 샘cen강라라 더 건더 타빔도르데 츠급샤파 타글라 영 따버런데 시버 기버런 여러함 종아담치 락섬지 교테르크드 마즈르집 좀든데 마운티는 갑자 담았담 비추랍든 지버런 주바나 장주성과 성과 전부 트럼더 담바 용던더 담바 셔럽더 담바 dom종테 람저 장주성과 침보 때더 정상 적치라 님 그르시바 마인드 상 적치라 게이시 게이스타 기바 마인지 람저 상제 멈춰도 말라 님 그르시장 상제 멈춰도 말라 게이스타 기비상 주성과 성화 침보 때 dom종 람저 강동 타빔도르데 샤바 강동 샘전다 바치즘 기버 겨와 때더나 대장 서베임 켄노 람저 때더나 대장 서베 즈데 람저 샘전 때더 탐전 소름기 봉보 고담에 바 예장 용서 더버른 여로 대지저 제나 람저럽 장저선화 대 전부 때더나 더더 드시반 직버 መንጀር 샘전던 드시반 마연 박쪽던 드시반 마연 강석던 드시버는 직버는 መንጀር 비시로 람저 장저선화대 선화 전부 때더 장 주선 드시바던 주메버연 드시버 መን직 때더는 드시단지 드시메버는 직버 መንጀ로 它这里有一个叫做是我们
Over here, it says that even the correct teaching of the Dharma should be abandoned. How much more so the incorrect teaching? So some people would use this as the excuse, saying that we should then abandon the correct teaching. We should not grasp onto any appearance. Yes, from the aspect of reality, from the ultimate teaching, you should contemplate in such a way. But it could then lead you onto a wrong path. In fact, if you have not had the full enlightenment of emptiness, and if you were to then practice in such a way and not grasping or not practicing the correct Dharma, in such a way, you're only using this excuse and would accumulate negative karmas for yourself. In fact, before attaining full enlightenment, you should still then continuously to practice making offering of the Dharma, making the offerings of water and incense and all of those. There are people who then talk There are people nowadays who directly and study Diamond Sutra at the beginning, and they would use this teaching as an excuse for themselves to kill and to eat flesh and so on. Yes, the ultimate truth, on the ultimate truth is empty. There's nothing that is solidly existing. But you have not realized that, then you should not then abandon the good and the correct Dharma. And in such a way, you won't be able to attain enlightenment, so to speak. You won't.
샘전은 점버냐 쪽든 점버냐 쪽든 점바당 강석든 점버냐 예비셔로 가테 주도 메버는데 시바나야 되는 대덕거든 점버는 예정 샘전든 점바당 쪽든 점바당 강석도 전반 예비셔로 대지지나 람저 전주선화 추경 로버업 종으로 마셔대 추마연바랑 로버업 종으로 만저 먹종 위셔로 대외나 대라공대 대정석비 추지 남자 더 상스타버는데 시바남지 추남전 폰으로 시에나 추마연 바나 바타지 무지 손소 양 정든데 기세단단 바람 저란들께 직접 저도 람저 더적냠다 세마 대비전 억샤가更라나미 바양도 버조버 션체도 몸버조버 상 기비 추대다가 양 요점 냠나 대비전 석비 추대다가 양 단남 냠나 대기 직접 살아담 정든데 기세단단 바람 저 더께 직접 살아도 정든데 덕급 정든데 기 송버 돈 살바를 열나 대비전 석바 라나미 바양도 버션 접도 몸버 상 예비 추대다가 라양 맘지바 러서 대비전 석비 단 비추대다가 맘지바 러서 디지라드지나 대비전 석비 추대다가 양 몸버 상 예바금 탐바데랑 zon도 맘지버 조도 맘지바당 때는 추경 말어봐 추 맘지바야 말어비 라트고 티지라트 제남 법비 강성 남는 듯이 니마시지 랍도 시비 라트고 좀든데 집가 서바 람저도 냠도 삼들이 기버르 기모 강라라 지거 통 섬지 통 제mon지텐기 감더 뭐치스납든 지라도 강대 좀 발전바베 기버 강 르기모 강지급 소름기 봉보 멍더 제더 냠맘 람저 직소로 앞준던데 망라서 대버럭셔바 망라서 르기우 모강 젤레 소놈기 봉보 망도 제도 대지라드 제납 소놈기 봉보 대양 봉보 맘지베라도 대외나 대전 소비 소놈기 봉보를 소 직송소 좀던데 기과자와 람저지 직기보 르기우 모강 통섬지 통지부 직된기 감더 뭐지나든지 랍도 강월 시대 짐발짐바베 강그 추지 남전도 라식 타나 측지위 측습자박 측좀 존나양 잔탁라양 덕버는 차장 덕버 톰바 나그즈텔레 소놈기 봉보 망더 메바츠 메버는 여로 타첼리아
And it says that the 3,000-fold world, if it were to then make offering of the jewels and all of those treasures to make offering as much as the Ganges River, and then compared to such kind of merit, in fact, the merit of studying Diamond Sutra, it has already surpassed such kind of merit to make offering to the Buddhas of the 3,000 world. So we should remember this. If we were to practice in such a way, if we were to make offering, if we were to study and listening and contemplating and practicing up on the Diamond Sutra, in fact, such kind of merit is extraordinary and surpass all kinds of other merits. So over here it talks about upholding and practicing and chanting, reciting. All of these kind of merits, in fact, is extraordinary. So even if you don't understand, at least if you were to think about that the Diamond Sutra is so meritorious, if I were to chant it within every chant once every day and chanted once a month, chanted once a year, such kind of merit to surpass the merit of making offering to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 3,000 world. Even if you don't understand it, I think at least you should feel grateful to meet the
상기지 주남 집샤 ramjur ramjur 상기지 주남 집샤와는 상기지 주대다 다음에 바데 정식백 송비 셔러데 디나 상기지 주남 집샤고 ramjur다 전냠도 셈 견도 직반도 냠도 더거진도 지금 저거 토 냠도 셈맘 ramjur 직소로 정던데 말아서티 지지제나 정던데 지라양 지바 맘치 비슬라드 티나 진도 지바 지겨 워즈 라양 마지바당 자라양 마지바당 자라양 마지 자라양 마르 로라양 마르 럽샤라양 마르 베추나라양 마르데티 진도 지바 지겨 워티 지라드 지나 정던데 카테 진도 지바 냠도 더거 진도 지금 제베 토 냠도 셈버지나 데닐라도든 점바양 저와 럭소 셈진 든 점바당 쪽든 점바당 강서든 점바른 저와 럭소 정던데 지 과자와 람저도 냠도 셈데 랑치시르고 냠도 다깔랑식 시르고 제베 토 냠도 셈맘 람저지 바 정던데 데마럭소 티지라드 지나 강라更啦，这个是公话，你们的这个得跟我们这边来多过，你们不要打瞌睡啊。
Do not fall asleep, okay?
如果打瞌睡的话，那
If you were to fall asleep or doze off,
第那两就是公话就小我中等的几，两就是公话都你们的那个，两就是公我们这个土，你们的什么地儿那点都都。Zimberjera Lakso, Simson, and Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe, Council, and Zimberjera Lakso, Jordan, the Kikwat Sarava, Jordan, the Nyam, the same to Shirmagoma, Nyam, the Shirmagom, Jevo, Nyam, the same Nyam, I'm Jurgi Sora, Jordan, the Ten Malos, teachers, the Jena Ganga, Shirmagwania, the Jiguba, Chutela, Kama, Jibilato, Tishan, Shirmagua, Jigio, Jordan, the Kikwat Sarava, I'm Jur. The Jam, the same day, Rapjumba, and the Rapjumbani, two, Nyam, the same Ramjurgi Sora, Jordan, the Then Malakoti, Gilata, Jena, Kansa, Jumba, the young Gilado, Jordan, the Cater, Jumba, Nyam, the Duck, or Jumba, two, Nyam, the Semper, Jena, the Doctor Zambergira, Logso, Simpson, the Badon, Jordan, the Badon, Council, the Zambergira, also Jordan, the Don, the Division of Jumba, the words of San Gigi, Junior, Bame Barney, Beam, Chok, the Tande, Jordan, the Doctor, Jaro, Jumba, Logian, Jordan, the Nyam, the Dono, Jumba. Nyam the same also, Jordan the Catin, the Nyam the Jumba, two, Nyam the Semper, Division of Rigiva Ramjur, Nyumume Bala, Neba, Namjim Chur, Yende, Chilayan, Marnebe, and Nyumumba, Neba, Mebala, Neba, Long, Martun, Balagso, Jordan the Kikat Sarvat, Ramjur, Nyam the same division, Shabbat, division, Shabbat, Jumbayan, Jumbayan, the Porto Santi Marmin, Zada, Kanlavate, Yang, Nyambir, Ramjur, Sora, Jordan the Ten, Malakso, division, Shabbatin. Division Shabbat, Jumbayan, the Porto Santi Marmin, the Kanla, Chutela, Yongye, Mamchi, Baloso, Jordan the Kikat, Ramjur, and Sanwa Kanla, Lazik, and the Dak Jean Coparnam, Drubo, Ji, Natin, Mabdember Mawo, Tijina, Ramjur, Cobarnam, Jean Cuba, number Jisha, Cubate, Mepa, Division Shabba, Sumba, Shirate, Tina, Jean Coparnam, so Ramjur, Tavena, Shans of Senhua, Chimboland, Termone, Baji, Pershate, Chilla, Magneba, Simki, Pershaw, 那个我们藏文的那个这个金刚经是
in the Tibetan version, in fact, the Diamond Sutra is more than the condensed version that's translated by Kumarajiva. And the Xuanzang's version was, in fact, more in words than those that's compared to the Kumarajiva. I myself think that Xuanzang's version is probably the most appropriate in terms of this Diamond Sutra. I think it's probably because of the different editions that they got at the time as the root text to translate. I think at the beginning, I give the teaching of the Diamond Sutra. I give the sutra based on the Xuanzang's version, and later on, I give the teaching based on the translation of Kumarajiva due to some reasons. Anyhow, the translation given by Master Xuanzang was more specific and easier to understand, and more complete. I think the content is rather a little bit different. Where it then says that you should then the mind should act without any attachment. I think the sixth patriarch attained enlightenment based on this stanza. So it is says that we should then give rise or have the mind should act without any kind of attachment. So this is the mind of emptiness. This is the core of the teaching of the Diamond Sutra. The sixth patriarch attained enlightenment based on this teaching, isn't it? But lots of people who chanted the Diamond Sutra for hundreds times, not only they did not get enlightenment, they had more afflictions than they used to. So, as Mandamis, we may hear and we may then
Perna Cheva Zika Lilander Tender Jarbo Rupsam the Gerada, Ramjur Nichinium, the Lite Cheva Yenam, Ramjur Tiksura, Jordan de Lite Cheva Lagso, the Roshaba, Lite Cheva Lagso, Tejilatazina, the Roshaba, Ubu Mamchibe, Sumbi, Lato, Tina Lite, Cheva Zivio, Tela. Mubo Mamchi Betation Soberson de Ten, Liji Shao John, the Jukatara Ramjur, Jim the same the Congo Jimani, Congo Jimani, Tekona Jero, the Shimakan and Batena, Mama Yenam, Ramjur Jirsora, John the Congo Jima, Teta Mama Lasso, Teta Shima, Start Muji Chen Sarah, John the Jukatara Ramjur, to the Mubara Shao, Chuchi Konda Chipper Shao, Congo Jimani, Cherny Pateni, Jiktenji Kamna, Tibagam, but me. Quand la Zikarambo Chirna then Girap the Congress, the Tejan Sabat of Jumbayan, the Porto Sandia, Namla Jimba, Janaram Jim the Chiniam the same. Kibagam with me, the Zilapsonium, the Kibagam, Ramjur, Soro, Jondan de Malaso, the Rosaba Malaso, the Rosabama Kirdam, and Mekan Lala, Sonam Gimant of Keeper Laxo, and Jondan the Kipkazara, Ramjur, Congo, and Jikten Kamdena, then Boches, not then Girap the Congress, the Tejan Sabat of Jumbayan, the Porto Sandia, Namla Jimba, Jimba, Congo, Chuji Namdan, the Tana, Sixbits of Jabba, Shoes on the Jantalayan, the Brujabat, Young Tabar, Rapt of Tana, Tiny, Zitele, Young, Sunum Chia, Manda, Home
even more than the sands in Ganges River. Even if you uphold, even if you then chant the 4 verses of the Diamond Sutra, it is surpass the merit.
Shooting the Kira, Sijiki, Chuchi Namjan, the Lembadan, Javadan, Zambadan, Chamadan, Lobadan, Shanjubadan, Surgeon the Yella, Sheba, Yella, Shipan Sara, Saradan, Dambrikira, Tarmujan, Tirton Bagam Lama, Tower Kirayan, Roman, so Tirkichika Saradan, John the Kitchen Damba, Ramjaland Kichika, so John the Chuchi Namjan, the Mala Chertar, Tirkichik Zoradan, John the Kitchen Damba. Ramjurland Kitchor, Ramjur, Chuji, Namjan, Mashiriki part of Shimba, and Dr. Zonshi, Tijina, Ramjur, Tondeo Sabat, Shirki part of Shimba, Consum Batin, a part of Shimba, maybe Shirdatina, Shirki part of Shimba, Jivja, Ramjur, Juniam, the same. Division Sabat of Jumba, Young Kangason, De Lion, Chuan, of Yotum Yam, Ramjur, Jixura, Chon, and De Division of Bersomba, Chute, and Kayam Mamchi, so. Hayodosha. Ramjur the Yam the same sort of some Jidon Jemo Jini Gamner, the Jenny Obama, Palatini Hayu Kachang.
In fact, I have more things to. I plan to have give more teachings, but
John they see the Mala so they Shabbat, Mala so the Jila de Jena. John they see the Rekan about the Mamchi Batation Shabbat Jambayan of Tina, Sumba Flato, Tina, Dre, Jisha, Joe, and Jitenjika.
Last year I gave the oral transmission as well, isn't it? How did I give teachings last year? No? Yes? No? How long did I take last year? Two classes as well? I don't think so.
Tina Jistin come, Jivjo, John and Giquatsar, Ramjur, Juniam the same. Steve Chimbum, some Chisani, potato, Gadish, about Jumba, and over the Sanji, Tower of Joe, Yamba, Ramjur, Sura, John and the Malak, so Tijilat, and Chimbum, some Chisani, about the Rosso, Belson, Batetum, some Mamchi, Bateon, Somba, Flatter, Tina, Chimbum, some Chisani, Jivjo, John and the Giquatsar, Ramjur. Kiba Mekanji, Congo Jimini, Lee, on Satan, Congo Chuji, Namjan, the Tana Suji, Java, zongwa te zhen dagla yang dagbar dana tenye le sonam ji mangda zhang me ba huang me bram pero tenye zidan dama ram zhurji chu ji shi ji mam chi chima shiong tem chima chi ne jab chen dun dar ki sur do chu ji nam zhang da de so be chi ni be song ba na chung den de ngom sarwa lo so de so ba ngom sarwa lo so chung den de da ge shi ji chu ba zhen ne da ge chu ji nam zhang da ngun nam nam yang ma tu so ti ji la de ji na chung den de dur de sha ban da la yang da ban ye dan de shi ba ki bin ge ri sim chen de dong ngom sarwa dang dang bar ngir wa la so de zhe ge fo ji san san xi xi
To have faith towards this sutra, in fact, is quite rare. You should read into it. The ones who have faith towards the Diamond Sutra is very rare.
직불 መንጀ르 정 심신는데 시바당 쪽든 시바당 강석든데 시벌 መንጀ르와 로소 디지라드 제납 좀든데 더든데 시바당 심신든데 시바당 쪽든데 시바당 강석든데 시바로 베텔라양 심신 담제답 차릴라도 디지라드 제나 산지 좀든데 남는데 시바담 제담 차릴라도 데르기 지소라담 좀든데 기제담 바람절란데 그지 소도 람저르 대전도 대전도 심신 강동도 된도 샤발라 마적 magngwa rabda ngwa manjerwa de ngomtsrwa dang dang ber dir du jiang zhe ge fa de shi ge yu xie人不害怕的
There are people who do not have fear when they listen to this teaching. In fact, it's quite rare. Do you have fear? Are you sure? You're not afraid?
디나 바로도 심바 담바지 샤고 람저 대정 서법 조비 바로도 심바 송바 데나 조비 바로 더 심바 메도 디지시나 람저강 그 그가랑 그 디아르부니 양락당 양락 남자바 제와 디체라 더던데 시바금 셈sen던데 시바 소던데 시바 강석던데 시바 양마오숑웨 ngalan데 시장 메반 지근데 시 메버 제와가 마인 비시로 디지시나 람저카데 디 쟁알압더던데 시브르 숑나 디 쟁노 심진데 시점 중에 셈전 안데 시바당 초던데 시바당 강서던데 시바데 디 쟁노 셈던데 시반 중 유셔로 람저링에 몸브르 시반 데비 디나강 아체르갑게 디가 체르버 갑게 조파지샤와 장총데 제르와 디 쟁나 알압더던데 시와 마숑 셈전던데 시바도 초던데 시바당 강석던 시바 마숑 오람저 때때에나 장주산화 전부 시바 탐처도 시바 탐처 방데 라나메 바용도 버조 샹저도 셈키브르죠 어즈글라양 마네 버셈키브르죠 자당 저동 로당 럭샤나양 마네 버셈키브르죠 출라양 마네 셈키브르샤고 추 메발라양 마네 버셈키브르죠 출라 마네 바용 셈키브르죠 디지지지나네 바칸 바테나 마네 비브저데 데베나 데비정 샤바 안더케지 거저도 샹주산화라양 마네 버점바점브 샤오 지송소 람저 상회 때들 심전 담지기 돈도 좀 봐용서 동르셔 심전 담지 공연 바대용 대지 셔버데 대용 셔바 담지 강다가 송비 대덕 담지니 좀에도 뒤셔도 람저 대비정 셔바나 양다 배송바 덴브로 송바딘 덴브로 송바 대비정도 송바 대비정 셔바나 로버로 송바 마인 비슈로 对，这个没有那么多，应该是这样。denbro松吧，他这里啊，就是说，就如来是。
And over here it says that the Tathagata speak the truth, real and as it is. His words are neither deceptive nor contradictory. So the Tathagata talks about the truth of all phenomena. He knows all the detail and the truth of all phenomena. As mundane beings, in fact, mundane beings doesn't have the relative or ultimate truth, and mundane beings doesn't speak to the different faculties, to the different kinds of sentient beings. It will be very difficult for the mundane beings to speak the truth according to the different faculties of the sentient beings. But over here, it says that Tathagata speaks of the truth. the Xuanzang's version, it says that the Tathagata speaks of the truth, real, does not speak of the words that's deceptive nor contradictory. So it has only 4, but over here it has a 5. In fact, all the sutras are now included in the Tripitaka texts. All the teachings that we can read through the Tripitakas, that the teachings that's included in the Tripitaka, they are all words of truth that's spoken by the Tathagata. They are then the truth of the phenomena. So our faith towards the Tathagata is in fact not of any superstition, not of any blind faith, but the truth of the Tathagata is of benefit to all sentient beings, is of the truth, and pointing out the truth of phenomena for the sentient beings. If such kind of a speech of Tathagata is not the truth, then we don't have to listen to it. I think it will be very difficult for beings to accept it at the beginning. But if you were to read into it, if you were to study in depth, then you'll be able to develop such a kind of faith. For people who've studied the teachings on the Buddhist logic, where there's a book and a chapter specifically talking and distinguishing from the analogy, from the analysis talking about how and why the Tathagata speaks only the truth. I think it's not too much left. I thought I won't be able to finish reading it today. I remember there are about 100 pages, but now I think I will be able to finish it very soon. And I think the Diamond Sutra, it talks about, it usually talks in different aspects. The first, it talks about he neither speaks of the words that's deceptive nor contradictory, and then it talks about that there is really no words that is then contradictory or deceptive. So it talks about these kind of terms and this kind of perspective in turns. Otherwise, people, in fact, I think lots of people get confused because they don't really understand this kind of logic. People who study the Madhyamika, who study the Madhyamika Avatara, they'll be able to understand this because it talks first from the relative truth and then talks about the ultimate truth. It talks about the relative truth first, and then it talks about from the level of ultimate truth. Otherwise, you won't be able to understand if you don't understand how to differentiate the relative and ultimate truth. Only if you understand it, then you'll be able to understand this text. In fact, if you were to understand, first of all, it starts of talking about how to tame one's mind. Yes, mind does exist in our relative truth, but from ultimate truth, the mind is empty. And if you can understand it from both aspects, then you'll be able to understand the truth of our emotions and afflictions. That is why lots of sentient beings don't understand the truth, because they don't understand this kind of logic, and they don't understand the relative truth, and they don't even understand the relative truth. How can you then expect them to understand the ultimate truth? People nowadays would grasp onto the appearance aspect, would grasp onto the existent aspect, and they would grasp that everything do appear. There are people who would say that, oh, look at the rainbow, it's really beautiful. But is there anything that is really the rainbow? Is there something that is solidly graspable about the rainbow? So that's from the relative truth. Yes, it appears from the ultimate truth, it is empty. There is nothing to grasp onto. Just as nowadays, the young children would love to grasp a piece of rainbow. They would chase it and they would want to have a piece of it. But after chasing and after how, doesn't matter how much they try to grasp it, there's nothing to grasp onto. That is how mundane people are, that they don't understand what the reality is. There is a term that is called the post-truth era. Oxford Dictionary also included post-reality era as well. People, what that means is that the media, the news, and merchants, they would then try to sell their idea as much as possible. And then people would buy their idea, would then accept that idea. Before the discovery and before the invention of planes and trains and cannons and all of those, in fact, people don't understand what they are. And now there are the materialistic advancement, and then people recognize it. And people get distracted by all kinds of materialistic advancement, but they lost themselves and they lost their spiritual path. Unlike how during the era where there are not enough material, I think the modern people really lack the kinds of spiritual path. People hear different kinds of news on celebrities and different kinds of rumors about others, and they would think that it's true, and then they will hold a standard of going against of them. But those kind of so-called truths are really sometimes are made up. Therefore, I think it is quite important in this era to search for the truth. So we finish the 14th chapter, and then the later part, it says that the ones who then chant, who then give the teaching of others on the even 4 verses of this sutra, then the merit is immeasurable and infinite. Tomorrow I'll give you the teaching of the second part.